It's a great day to be alive and an artist. My name is Matt with the Hat, and today in our audition series, we are going to take our next step with our guideposts and look at two of them. The first one is humor. So when I talk about humor, you may be thinking, I'm going to tell a little yak yak joke, right? Or a little bit of that kind of Jim Carrey or Robin Williams type of activity. Well, the guideposts of humor is not exactly that. And I actually combine both of these two guideposts because they are fundamentally part of the same thing. So humor is actually a way of coping with life. All right. And so it's an interesting thing. If you were to study the Alexander technique, you would find out that the breathing patterns of laughter are the way to make yourself cry. So if you were to take, you can even test this out for yourself. It's a pretty crazy deal. If you were to start breathing in the same way that when you laugh, like we're talking crazy laugh, it will induce tears. And this is something that you can learn with the Alexander technique, because fundamentally, the closest thing to grief is laughter. And that's why sometimes you'll see people that they laugh so hard that they cry. It's because the breathing patterns are identical for laughter and crying. So how does this relate to humor? Well, these things that are seemingly on the opposite sides of the spectrum, humor and a sad moment or an angry moment or whatever, they are actually very close to each other. So if you've ever been to a funeral, which I hope you haven't yet, but at some point you will, because death is one of the inevitabilities of life that we all try to avoid. You will notice that there are tears, but more in abundance at a funeral often, especially after, is lots of laughter. People start to talk about that person and these stories that they have. Like, for example, when my dad died, there were so many stories about jokes that he had, or his engaging laugh, or his witty sense of humor that would come from nowhere, right? And these points of humor are a way, again, I mentioned, to deal with coping with whatever's going on, right? So how do I use that as an actor? What are the techniques involved in that? One of the things that I like to say is that acting is more about the suppression of emotion than the expression of emotion. And one of the ways we can suppress our emotion is by playing with humor. Okay, so one of the common things that we talk about in our Artist's Way series is people saying, I'm fine, when they're not fine, right? And this is sometimes a point of humor, right? And so rather than playing the obvious, because I remember there was this one moment, and it was actually in Romeo and Juliet. It was a high school performance, and there were two performers playing Juliet, and we all thought this one Juliet was phenomenal. She cried the entire show. She was so impressive because she emoted the show. And the other Juliet, we weren't all that impressed with. We were like, she's playing Juliet, right? When my parents saw that film, in a very odd way, they see it or when they saw that play, when my parents saw that play, they saw both Juliets, and they very distinctly said that the one we all thought as actors was great was terrible, and the one that we all thought was bad was great. And what they said about the one who emoted and was constantly crying is they said she was crying so much that we were ready for her to die. We didn't care about her. And this is a thing with young actors, especially, is that we want to express those emotions. It's a sad moment. Instead of going, remember, our guideposts, number 2 was about conflict. What are we fighting for? And if we just give up with our grief, it's not interesting, right? But we try to hide our grief. We try to suppress it. And often that is through a joke. We say something very serious with a smile, right? So let's say we're having a sad scene, right? And someone died. Let's just use that as a regular thing. One choice would be to play the obvious and just go, Dad died. And of course I'm playing around there. Another choice, if the line was Dad died, which it's never probably going to be like that, is to smile, and it's to hold that grief behind your eyes. And you walk up and you say, well, Dad died. And you see, that gives it texture when we play the humor of it. When we laugh, when we're supposed to cry, that makes it interesting. Because the truth about human emotions is that sometimes we cry when we're really happy. Sometimes we yell when we're really happy. Sometimes we are quiet when we're really angry instead of just yell. And so we want to try this humor idea is that human beings, when they're going through something, and when you're in a play, you are going through something, right? Human beings try to cheer themselves up. They make jokes to themselves. You have a bad day at work. Well, at least it wasn't like that other day, right? Something happens to a friend of yours and you make a joke. You go, well, it's not happening to me. You do all of these different sorts of things that help us cope with whatever's actually going on, because the idea we have is that if we were to actually deal with those emotions, they would be so overwhelming that they would overtake us and we would die. We might kill ourselves, or we might do something like that. And so humor is a very interesting choice, where something bad happens and the expectation is that the other person is just going to start falling apart and they're going to start weeping, and then that person starts belly laughing. And then that person in the scene that just gave this devastating news is like, have they lost their mind? And it gives it much more interest. And that's what the guidepost of humor is about. So try to find, as you're working on your monologue, so we did relationship, right? That was guidepost number 1. We did conflict, which is what are you fighting for? How are you fighting for it? What are the tactics you're using to do that? The third one was the moment before. And now the 4th one is humor, right? So as you're working on that monologue, and find the places where you might take that thing as a joke, where you might smile when you should be crying, where you might smile when you should be angry, because nothing's creepier than if you have a boss who's like, I've got to let you know, if you do that again, you're going to be fired. Yeah. And it makes it more interesting, and it gives you a little bit more tools to play with in your sandbag. All right. So we're going to move on from this one, because this is humor and opposites are they're one and the same to me. So the next guidepost on our list, so after guidepost number 4, which is humor, guidepost number 5 is opposites. Now, opposites as a director are my favorite thing for actors to do. It is said that whatever is true, the opposite is also true. So let's say you are a dreamer and your dream is to be on Broadway, okay, or be famous. You want to be as famous as Taylor Swift, whatever floats your boat, right? Whatever is true, the opposite is also true, right? So you want success, but you don't. And what do I mean by that? You have those moments of, how would my life change? If I were to become that famous, my life would change in an instant, right? I don't want to be surrounded by the paparazzi. I don't want to be in the public all the time. And so opposites is playing the opposite of whatever the emotion is, right? When I'm angry, instead of, I'm going to yell like a big old hurricane, I zero it in. And I get very simplistic, and I get very small. And let's say the line was, you'll never do that. You'll never do that again. Let's say that's the line, right? And let's say the initial idea, because it seems angry and there's an exclamation point, is to go, you'll never do that again, right? And instead, getting it smaller and calmer, you'll never do that again. It's playing something opposite. We expect it to be an explosion, but instead it becomes zeroed in, and it becomes like a laser. Powerful. Yeah. Stillness is power. So when we think we're going to go big, go small. Yeah. When we think we're going to laugh, cry. Right? When we think we're gonna cheer, get subdued. See what happens in your monologue as you're working on it when you do this. Yeah, it's gonna totally open your world up. Now, don't overdo it. We're not playing on generalities. So if you've done the work of guidepost number 1, if you've got a clear relationship, you got guidepost number 2, you've got something you're fighting for. And you're playing that action of fighting for that thing, right? Then you got number 3, which is the humor. So you're already adding some opposites in. And then now you're adding your own opposites in, and they're very strategic and they're very interesting. And we're not playing generalities. We're playing it based off of the action. Yeah? So guidepost number 3, humor. Guidepost number 4, opposites. You are amazing. You are fantastic. Keep making art and have a beautiful day.